I saw my mother's face on the evening news, mascara running, wrists in silver cuffs, and realized this was only the beginning. The glass crunched under my shoes as I stepped into the living room. A cold draft slid through the jagged hole where the patio door used to be. Outside, the pool lights flickered against a thin spray of blood on the deck. She was gone now, taken by the cops half an hour earlier, but her perfume still hung in the air, sharp and sour with gin. The neighbors had gathered at the end of the driveway, not close enough to see the mess, but close enough to whisper. A few phones were raised, their blue screens reflecting in the wet asphalt. Somewhere behind them, the paparazzi's shutters clicked like insects. I kept my head down, feeling every flash as a silent accusation. Inside, the place looked like the aftermath of a hurricane. The dining table was overturned, the crystal chandelier swayed overhead, and my stepfather's voice echoed from the study. "They can't do this to us. Call Charles, call him now." His desperation cut through the air like a blunt knife. He was talking to no one. Charles was already gone. Fired the moment I made the call. I could still feel the sting on my shoulder where she'd shoved me, hear the sharp pop of the glass shattering as my body hit it. It wasn't the first time she'd lost control, but it was the first time she did it with an audience. The managing trustee had been standing right there, just behind the guests, his expression unreadable. The EMTs had asked if I needed the hospital. I'd shaken my head. "I'm fine." The cut on my arm was nothing. The bruise on my ribs was nothing. I had been waiting for this for years, really, and pain was part of the bargain. Now the house was eerily quiet, except for my stepfather's muffled shouting and the occasional crunch of an officer's boots across broken crystal. The heavy front door opened, and a tall figure stepped inside. Black overcoat, leather gloves, the kind of calm you only see in people who've spent decades in boardrooms tearing empires apart. "You all right?" he asked. I nodded. "It's started, hasn't it?" He glanced at the wreckage, then at the wet stain of gin on the rug. "Oh, it's well past started, but you'll need to be steady." I had been steady for years. I had smiled through every dinner where she paraded me like a trophy. I had agreed to every temporary decision she and her husband made about the trust. I had listened when she rewrote the family's history to cast herself as the savior. Tonight I'd broken that script. Just one correction, one fact she couldn't spin, and she'd snapped. I looked toward the dark study. My stepfather's voice had dropped to a hoarse whisper. "We can fix this. We can spin this." They still thought this was about gossip, about reputation. They didn't know the accounts were already frozen, the access codes changed, the legal triggers pulled the moment she put her hands on me. A thin thread of cold satisfaction wound through my chest. I began to think of when it all began, when I first understood that my grandfather had not trusted her with the fortune, that it was mine to guard, not hers to waste. That patience was a weapon, and I could wield it in silence until the day came when I wouldn't have to raise my voice at all. That day had come. From the upstairs landing, I could see them through the open doorway to the study. My mother pacing like a trapped animal, my stepfather hunched over the desk, tapping at his phone with trembling hands. They didn't notice me. People rarely notice the quiet ones until it's too late. Her voice cut through the air. "He's turning them against us, Robert. That little—" She stopped herself, glancing toward the door. "I raised him. I gave him everything. And this is how he thanks me." I didn't move. I'd learned long ago that stillness makes you invisible. Robert swore under his breath. "Charles isn't answering. The lawyers aren't answering. The bank—" He broke off, slamming the phone down. "You call them again," she said, pointing at him like a general ordering a soldier back into the line of fire. "They don't freeze my accounts without a reason." My reason was sitting right there in front of me. Two people so certain of their control that they couldn't imagine it was already gone. I turned away, leaning against the cool banister. My mind kept flashing back to the dinner 2 nights ago, the moment I'd chosen to light the fuse. The ballroom had been washed in gold light, the clink of champagne glasses punctuating every false laugh. My mother had been telling her favorite lie, the one about how she saved the family fortune after grandfather's death. I'd let her finish, smiled politely, and then said, "That's not quite how it happened, though, is it?" She froze mid-sip. The air at the table shifted. Excuse me. Grandfather named me managing beneficiary. You handle the day-to-day spending, but the trust deed. I let the sentence hang there. I could feel the eyes on us. It was subtle, deliberate, just enough to plant doubt in the room. But to her, it was an open challenge. She masked it with a brittle laugh, yet her hand tightened around her glass until her knuckles whitened. I'd seen the same tension before storms. Back in the present, I could hear her footsteps moving toward the hallway. I slipped into the guest bedroom before she emerged, closing the door without a sound. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping beneath me. My phone buzzed, a text from Alan, my grandfather's oldest friend, and the trustee who'd quietly guided me all these years. She's going to push. Let her. Cameras are ready. I stared at the message. It wasn't just that he believed me, it was that he'd been watching too. That made two of us in this house playing a long game. From downstairs came the crash of a cabinet door slamming. My stepfather shouted something about liquid assets. They still thought they could outrun this with cash. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with the weight of patience. Every instinct screamed to move now, to confront them, to tear away the last of their illusions. But I didn't. Instead, I walked to the window. The street was quiet now, the neighbors gone. Only the faint hum of an idling car remained, Alan's driver waiting at the curb. I could see the glow of a laptop in the back seat. I let the curtain fall back into place. This wasn't the moment. Not yet. The truth was, I didn't need to confront them at all. They'd do the work for me. All I had to do was stand still and watch the walls close in. I leaned back against the wall, listening to them tear through drawers and curse into the dead air of unanswered calls. And I wondered, not for the first time, if this was how my grandfather had felt, watching her after he cut her out of control. The thought almost made me smile, almost. By morning, the house smelled of stale liquor and burnt toast. I came downstairs quietly, my bare feet making no sound on the marble. Robert was slumped in the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, muttering into the receiver. My mother sat at the island, hair unbrushed, still in last night's dress. She didn't look at me. I poured coffee, letting the silence stretch. When I set the cup down, she finally spoke. "You think you've won something?" I didn't answer. She turned her gaze on me, eyes glassy but sharp. "You don't understand the kind of people I can call. This little stunt of yours freezing accounts. You'll regret it." I met her stare. "I don't think you understand the kind of people he called." Her mouth twitched, but she didn't ask who I meant. She knew. In the study, I found Alan waiting. He'd arrived while they were still asleep. His briefcase sat open on the desk, a thick file inside. "We've got enough," he said without preamble. "Financial abuse, misappropriation, threats, but if you want it to stick." "I want it to bury them," I said. We went through the evidence one piece at a time, unauthorized withdrawals, forged signatures, emails that dripped with veiled threats toward anyone who questioned them. Alan had been collecting quietly, but now the tempo changed. We were no longer observers, we were moving pieces. That afternoon, I tested the waters. I called one of Robert's friends, a property developer he often bragged about. I introduced myself as the managing beneficiary of the trust and casually mentioned that certain arrangements Robert had promised might no longer be valid. The pause on the other end told me everything. The man was already reconsidering his alliances. "Just thought you should know," I said before hanging up. It wasn't much, a probe, a small destabilizing cut in their web. But I saw the ripple by dinner. Robert paced the living room, phone in hand, voice raised. My mother watched him, her own phone untouched beside her glass. "Why isn't he picking up?" Robert barked. "Maybe," I said from the doorway, "because you've got nothing left to offer him." He turned on me, eyes narrowing. "Careful, boy." I just smiled faintly and walked away. The sound of his frustration followed me up the stairs. In my room, I opened my laptop and began drafting the first set of legal instructions. Alan had prepared contingency filings for Protocol 7. They would move automatically once triggered, but I wanted my fingerprints on them. Not for vanity, just for certainty. For years I'd been silent because silence was safer. Now it was strategic. Every word I spoke was chosen, every action designed to push them 1 inch closer to collapse. And I realized, as I saved the file and closed the laptop, that I didn't feel like the boy who'd endured their control anymore. I felt like the one holding the reins. It hit me 3 days later, fast, sharp, like a door slamming in my face. I'd gone into the city for a quiet meeting with one of the trust's smaller creditors, a man who owed more loyalty to my grandfather's name than to my mother's influence. Alan had arranged it. We were to meet in the back of a private club, dark wood, leather chairs, the air heavy with cigars. He didn't show. Instead, a young receptionist approached me with a folded note. No greeting, no smile, just a slip of paper in her hand. "Don't contact me again. Too much heat." I stared at it, the ink smudged at the edges. My stomach tightened. If they'd gotten to him this quickly, they were still dangerous. Back at the house, I felt the shift before I even opened the door. Music was playing too loud, too cheerful. My mother's favorite weaponized hospitality. She was in the living room with Robert and two men I didn't know, all drinking, laughing too hard. She spotted me and smiled, not the brittle kind from the dinner, but slow and deliberate. "Darling," she called, "come meet our guests." I didn't move. "Who are they?" "Friends," she said lightly. "They're here to help. Tidy up some of the mess you've made." One of the men stood. His suit was expensive, but his eyes were cold and flat. "We understand you've been making some unusual financial decisions. Perhaps we can talk about that privately." I felt the trap and stepped into it anyway. In the study, they closed the door behind me. The second man leaned against the wall, arms folded. "You're young," he said. "You've got time to rebuild your life. But right now, you're in over your head. Your mother loves you, you know. She just wants what's best." It was almost laughable. Almost. But the way the first man's hand rested on the back of the chair made the humor vanish. This wasn't negotiation. It was intimidation. I played the only card I could without tipping my hand. The trust deed is public record. Anyone can see the terms. They didn't flinch, but something shifted in their expressions, a calculation. They knew I was right, but they were betting I didn't have the stomach to push further. After they left, my mother followed me upstairs. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. She just stopped at the top step and said, "You have no idea what you've started." That night, I woke to the sound of shattering glass. I thought it was another accident until I saw the patio door again, smashed, the frame splintered. But this time the break came from inside. I followed the trail of broken glass to the pool deck, where Robert stood with a half-empty bottle, hurling the remains of our grandfather's antique sculptures into the water. "Yours now, boy," he shouted. "See how much they're worth when they're rotting at the bottom." The anger flared hot and sudden. I stepped forward, ready to strike, to end it right there, but something in my peripheral vision stopped me. In the upstairs window, my mother stood watching, her silhouette perfectly still. She wanted this. She wanted me to lash out, to give her something physical she could use against me. I backed away. My pulse roared in my ears, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from the effort of holding myself in check. Back in my room, I stared at my reflection in the dark glass of the window. My face looked thinner, sharper. I barely recognized it. This wasn't the victory I'd imagined. It was a street fight in evening clothes, and for the first time, I wondered if I was still in control. The next morning, I didn't go downstairs. I sat at my desk with the curtains drawn, the laptop open, Alan's files spread across the surface like a map of someone else's war. Except it was mine now. The bruises on my ribs had deepened to a dark plum color, but they barely registered. What stayed with me was the image of my mother in that upstairs window, waiting for me to break. She wanted a reaction. She wanted to pull me down to her level, into the noise and chaos where she thrived. I'd been playing defense, but that had to end. Alan called just after noon. "We have a problem, and an opportunity." The problem, my mother had called in favors from a senator's office, someone with enough reach to stall legal filings, lean on the banks, buy her time. The opportunity, a junior staffer in that office, had already reached out to Alan anonymously. They had proof that Robert had funneled money through shell companies, some of it touching political campaigns. It wasn't just about me anymore. This was bigger than a trust. I leaned back in my chair. If we use this, we're not just cutting them off. We're setting fire to the whole network. Exactly, Alan said. We met that night in a diner off the highway, the kind of place no one like my mother would be caught dead in. The staffer was already there, a young woman in a grey hoodie, her eyes darting to the door every time it opened. She slid a flash drive across the table without touching her coffee. It's all there, she said quietly. Transactions, emails, dates. He's been sloppy and greedy. I asked her why she was helping. She hesitated. Let's just say I've been in rooms where people like him think no one's listening. I was. On the drive back, the weight of it settled on me. This wasn't just revenge anymore, it was exposure. If this went forward, it wouldn't be two people falling. It would be a collapse that dragged others with them. Back at the house, I found the study door locked. I knocked once, no answer. I unlocked it with the spare key I'd taken months ago. Robert's laptop was open, the screen glowing with an email draft addressed to one of the shell company directors. I scrolled just far enough to confirm he was moving money again, fast, in panic. I took a picture of the screen and closed the laptop. Every move they made now was just more rope. The shift in me was quiet but absolute. Before, I'd been careful to avoid the line between strategy and aggression. Now I didn't care where that line was. Alan sensed it too. The next morning, he handed me a new folder. We're past defense, he said. This is extraction and broadcast. Inside were the outlines for simultaneous filings in 3 jurisdictions, media contacts prepped to run the story, and a checklist for freezing not just the trust accounts, but the personal accounts, the offshore reserves, even the art insurance policies. I studied the list, the precision of it, and felt something I hadn't in years. Clarity. They thought they were still playing chess. They didn't see that I'd switched the board entirely. It wasn't about waiting anymore. It was about ending this on my terms, in full view of the world they'd tried so hard to impress. The hearing room was colder than I expected, the kind of cold that makes people wrap their arms around themselves even when they're wearing tailored suits. Rows of chairs faced a long table where the trustees sat, flanked by attorneys. Behind me, the low hum of whispered speculation swelled and broke like waves. I stood near the center, Alan at my side, the folder of evidence in my hand. Across the aisle, my mother adjusted her silk scarf with slow, deliberate movements, as if she could fold her composure into the fabric. Robert sat next to her, pale and restless, eyes darting toward the doors as if measuring an escape. When my turn came, I didn't speak right away. I opened the folder, pulled out the printouts, and slid them across the table to the trustees. The room went quieter, no speeches, just numbers, transfers, names of shell companies. Let the paper do the work. One of the trustees looked up. Mrs. Calhoun, would you like to respond? Her laugh was thin, brittle. My son has been misled. These documents, Alan cut in smoothly, have already been verified by 3 separate auditors. The silence that followed was heavier than any accusation. I watched the color rise in her cheeks, watched Robert lean in to whisper something that made her eyes flash. Then the doors opened. A man in a dark suit stepped in, 2 uniformed officers behind him. He walked directly to Robert. Robert Lane, you're under arrest for wire fraud and embezzlement. Gasps rippled through the room. Robert shot to his feet, stammering. This is ridiculous. This is... His voice cracked as one of the officers took his arm. My mother rose too, but no one looked at her. She wasn't the headline now, she was the shadow next to it. The officers led Robert out, the heavy door shutting behind them with a final thud. My mother turned back to me, and for the first time in years, she looked. Smaller. You think this makes you strong? She whispered as she passed me. You'll end up just like him. I didn't answer. Strength wasn't about winning in front of her, it was about not needing her to see it. The trustees moved quickly after that, motions, signatures, the formal transfer of authority. When it was done, the chairwoman stood. Effective immediately, all management rights are returned to the named beneficiary. I gathered the papers, slid them into my folder, and walked out without looking back. Outside, the afternoon light was blinding. Reporters crowded the steps, microphones angled toward me. Alan kept them at bay, one hand on my shoulder as we cut through the noise. I didn't stop for questions. I didn't wave. Some victories didn't need applause. They needed distance. The house was quiet now, too quiet. Most of the furniture was gone, the art stripped from the walls, leaving pale rectangles where color used to hang. In the study, dust motes drifted in the beam of late afternoon light. The patio door had been replaced, its glass unbroken, smooth. I walked through slowly, fingertips brushing the edges of door frames, the grooves in the banister. Every sound felt louder in the emptiness, the creak of the floor, the faint hum of the refrigerator. On the kitchen counter, a single envelope waited. No name, no return address. I didn't open it. Out back, the pool was still, the water dark and calm. I stood there a long time, the smell of cut grass mixing with the faint trace of chlorine. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, a car door slammed. I sat on the edge of the deck, shoes dangling over the water, and pulled the lighter from my pocket. My grandfather's old one, scratched from years of use. I flicked it once, twice, until the flame held steady. Then I set it down beside me and watched it burn in the fading light.